big ball. Going for the big shot, and he hits it.
That's batted into the air, intercepted, and the Bears are going to win it.
There is a ton to discuss here in terms of what the Bears are doing at practice. Apparently, Ben Johnson is being labeled as this math/computer science nerd and a guy that kind of worked his way into the football profession, but he keeps going ahead and the Bears are having these super intense and physical practices. Welcome into the Halas Beat, brought to you by the Bear Report. Steve Letizia and Usayd Koshul here. Check us out on Twitter at CFC Bears and at Usayd Koshul, as well as at Halas Beat. Steve, I don't know about you, but things are getting interesting at Halas Hall. Things are getting interesting at Soldier Field with the Family Fest, because Sunday, I think, was Family Fest. Monday was kind of this closed, shut-off walkthrough where live tweeting wasn't allowed, and a lot of it was, well, you know, Caleb Williams is struggling, but then you had a ton of these fights break out, and then Brad Biggs is on Twitter saying, well, this is easily one of the most physical practices I've ever seen, and comparing it to basically the Lovie Smith days. So there's, I guess, a ton to unpack here, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you kind of nailed it. You know, Ben Johnson is kind of billed as this, you know, the offensive coordinator. He's going to come in and he's going to run trick plays and he's going to do all these unconventional things, but he's not really like a football guy. But I think working under Dan Campbell for a few years really wore off on him, because it's starting to show through in the practices. These practices are intense, they're physical, and it's really great to see. I think, you know, the people who were at practice today, you know, the reporters, they were saying, you know, it's the most physical practice they've seen since the Lovie Smith era, and which is notable for many reasons. One, that was a long time ago, and two, there were different rules with practices when Lovie Smith was the coach of the Bears. Different rules on physicality and how many padded practices you can have and everything like that. So the fact that they're having such physical practice, I think, is a really, really good sign. I think, you know, Eberflus and Nagy in the past, you know, when they came in, they said, we're going to be physical. These training camps are going to be tough. And they said all those things, but we never really saw it. And it's nice that Ben Johnson came in and said, we're going to be physical, we're going to be tough. And he's holding the guys to that and actually running his practices that way. So it's really encouraging to see that. And I'm excited to, you know, I feel confident in, like, so far in training camp, that when week one comes, the Bears aren't going to be outcoached. The Bears are not going to be out physical, you know, during the games. Hopefully the days of coming out, you know, ice cold to start the game are over. You know, I think these physical practices are really going to get them prepared well. So it's really good to see encouraging signs. You know, it's still just preseason. We're still talking about preseason practices, but so far just encouraging sign after encouraging sign from the Bears coaching staff.
And a little bit of an update on week one, because we're about a month out, I think a little over 30-ish days with it. But apparently Jordan Addison's been suspended for the first 3 games of the season, so he's not going to be available. And then Vikings left tackle Christian Darrisaw, who I so dearly wanted on the Bears many years ago, but they didn't have a first-round pick that year, is also expected to be out. I don't think he's fully recovered from the season-ending injury that had cost him the 2024 season, which, little bit of a side note here, there's an argument to be made, and again, we'll talk about the NFC North in the next couple episodes, but the reason that Minnesota offense didn't go as far as it did last year, or as far as a lot of people expected, is because Darrisaw was out. But again, that's a side note. See, getting back to this whole thing, so things are all of a sudden getting really interesting here, because when we talk about, you know, you mentioned the Eberflus era and the Nagy era, and I remember, I believe it was first off, the Matt Eberflus era is such a grim memory to me at this point. Like, as soon as they fired him, I was like, well, whatever. And I could tell you where I was and what I was doing when they had fired him, which that's going to be a story for off the air, by the way. But here is the whole deal with this thing. I think that, you know, when you remember Eberflus, his first year, the Bears got docked like 2 OTA practices by the league for being too physical and whatnot, and, you know, breaking the rules. I understand that, you know, OTAs and training camps have very different rules, but there's a sense of how do you respond here, right? So this is a coaching staff that's come in, they've established a reputation for, we're going to be super physical whether or not you like it. We're going to have this hard-nosed football team, the football that people that cover the Bears and watch the Bears are used to seeing, which, if we're being honest, hasn't seriously been here since the Lovie Smith days. And so they went into this thing and said it's going to be a super physical practice because we specifically want to see how this team is going to go ahead and respond. Because at the end of the day, I mean, the reality of it is this, is that when this team talks about the whole idea of competition at the left tackle spot, the linebacker spot, the cornerback spot, the reality of it is this, is that this is a team that, has a lot to sort out, and who can be the most physical guy on the field is probably going to be the one that ends up winning that starting job.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Ben Johnson said today that he told the defense that, the offense is coming for you today. We're going to be physical, and we're going to really come after you. And the defense responded, which I think is really good to see. And there were a couple actual, I don't want to call them fights, skirmishes, I guess we'll say, between the offense and defense today, which is normal for this time in training camp. You kind of see it every year. The Bears really, we have the Dolphins coming in later this week on Friday for their joint practice. I think that's going to be really helpful for this team because they clearly need someone to hit other than each other. But yeah, the physicality has been just great to see. All around offense, defense. The one thing, we should probably mention as well with physical practices, you might see an uptick in injuries. Cole Kmet did go out with an injury, undisclosed so far. Hopefully it's something serious. Doug Kramer also went out a little bit. So, I think you got to kind of straddle that line of physical and productive without getting into the other side of the coin, which is, guys need to, injuries happening, the wear and tear on the body over the course of a full season. The Bears do have an off day tomorrow. So I think that was kind of the reasoning for having this, more physical practice on there, because you have the rest day coming up on Wednesday. But yeah, I think it's something that is encouraging to see, but you don't want to go kind of overboard with it and everything like that.
Yeah, and see, it's so tough because in the past we've kind of seen this team say, well, especially under, I feel like, Ryan Poles here, which, I mean, I'm just going to come out and say it, but you can't necessarily, I think, give Ryan Poles a pass anymore for anything that's happening or anything that's happened, because he's kind of had, his time to be able to build and mold this roster into what he's wanted. So I'm not saying I'm out on Ryan Poles. I'm not saying he's on the hot seat, but I do think that it's time Ryan Poles starts to show some results. Now, in the past under Poles, it's interesting because we've heard, hey, we're going to be tough. We're going to be a physical football team. We're going to build our identity around that. And again, all that stuff I'm paraphrasing here, but you start to look at things here, and there were a couple of, skirmishes that broke out today. I know one of the notable ones was, I think it was Austin Booker versus Braxton Jones right there, which was, I think, to me, not necessarily a giant skirmish, but it kind of happened, in the sense of, hey, we are going to go ahead, we're going to set the tone and end up being physical with everything, and then I know that there were other guys like our publisher, Zach Pearson, kind of talking about how, well, we have never seen this many sort of fights break out. Javon Dexter stepped in and, shoved Braxton Jones as well. So it is sort of this dynamic of the situation here where I think that, both these sides are being incredibly tested in a way to kind of see who's going to be the side that wins the fight, essentially.
Yeah, and also, who are the guys are going to, hold up this physicality. You got to put these guys kind of through the ringer to see who's going to, back down from it, who's going to kind of step up when things get physical. So I think that's a part of this as well. They want to see, which of these, second, third stringers are going to be able to, are going to be physical throughout the season and not shy away from when things get physical. So I think that's part of it too. It's not only just the offense, defense, but just evaluating the physicality of these guys and getting the guys just ready for the regular season. Because once the regular season comes on, they're going to start hitting, and there's going to be teams that are prepared for that, and there will be teams that are not prepared for that. And the Bears seem like they might be the team that is prepared for it, which would be a huge change of pace because the Bears have, over the last decade or so, have always started slow, not only games, but the season. But especially, in the games, I feel like the first quarter of for the past 4 or 5 years, the first quarter has been a wasteland for the Bears, and then they kind of pick it up from there. So hopefully we see that change. Another thing about this, the physicality, you mentioned, under Eberflus that they got docked OTA practices or whatever it was because they had, too much physicality in the games, more than what was allowed by the CBA. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens based off this practice because it sounds like it was extremely physical, and at the same time, I'm not even sure if that's a bad thing. I think, Ben Johnson, in order to change the culture, you have to change the culture. And if that means maybe skirting some rules and getting fined down the road, I think Ben Johnson's perfectly okay with that because it sets the tone for the team. It sets the tone for the franchise. It changes the culture in there. So if they get fined, if they get docked to practice, whatever it is, I'm sure that Ben Johnson would be okay with that.
And I should mention that any rule of football, there's always going to be teams that are breaking the rules and doing something they're not supposed to. But, the other big thing I think to mention there with that is this. If you get docked to practice, I believe the rule is you're not allowed to be on the field with helmets, shoulder pads, but you can go inside and still have team meetings and film in order to have a mental day. Switching gears here, though, the Bears' unofficial depth chart just dropped. This is one of those things to where, it's not necessarily official by any means. It's also something which is sorting itself out, but you start to kind of look at this thing here and there's a couple different surprises here. First off, Braxton Jones being listed as the first string left tackle, especially after having been out over the last couple practices in terms of not practicing with the first team. I think the second thing is obviously, Kirana Magaji being listed as a second string right tackle. Luther Burden appears to be a third string receiver right now behind Zacchaeus, which I do think is a little interesting. Manungai, the running back, is behind Travis Homer at this point, which is a bit of a shock. And then the linebacker 3 right now appears to be Noah Sewell in a sort of foot race with Amen Ogbongbemiga. I will figure out how to say that properly when the season gets here.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, this is very much written in pencil right now with the depth chart. It's always fun to look it over. I pulled it up right now to kind of get a view of it, but it's obviously written in pencil. It's not uncommon for the rookies to be listed lower on the depth chart than what they will actually end up being. That's pretty standard, I think, for most teams. I do think, but Braxton Jones being listed first is notable. I think with Zacchaeus and Burden, like I said, I think that's just giving the veteran the benefit of the doubt there. Although I think Zacchaeus will have a big role in this offense, as well as Burden. I think both will be in there. What I'm just looking at right now, though, is on the flip side of that coin is that Colson Loveland is listed as a starter with Cole Kmet, which is very interesting. Having them both as starters and not Cole Kmet and then Colson Loveland behind him or vice versa. I think that's really interesting. But yeah, it's really... I'm again just kind of scanning it now, but besides that, on the defensive side, I mean Noah Sewell with the starters, I think makes sense. He seemed to be the guy who's kind of taken that third linebacker spot and ran with it, which is good. I think he's a really good fit for that strong side linebacker position. And then you have a couple guys behind that, but I think no huge surprises here. And again, this is very much written in pencil, as I said before.
Well, I mean, we did suggest this before, but so let me expand on this. The one sort of semi-surprise to me is Kirana Magaji being listed as the right tackle behind Darnell Wright instead of the left tackle. Now, this to me is the Bears basically saying, all right, well, our decision is coming down to a Braxton Jones or Ozzie Trapilo being one of two guys starting at left tackle. You throw Karan Amagaji in the mix there, and all of a sudden now it's like, is this team really going to choose from three potential starters at left tackle? So they're taking him and they're saying, we see enough upside, we see enough athleticism, we realize it's sort of your first true training camp. Because remember, last year he missed basically all of training camp with the quad injury, which a Bear scout told us that the franchise had no concerns about that at all, and then it knocked him out for all of training camp. But I think they're taking Amagaji, and what they're basically doing is saying, all right, we're going to figure something out for you, dude, but whatever we figure out, if you end up becoming depth at right tackle, that's good as well. Because I think, it goes back to what you said a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about this roster. I mean, this is a roster that at the end of the day doesn't have a lot of depth at the offensive line position, right? We're kind of waiting for guys like Doug Kramer and Ryan Bates to be fully healthy and develop into something. But if they don't, then all of a sudden you're hoping that the Canadian Eagle and Theo Benedict develops into something. But I don't think any of us want to see another year of so-and-so practice squad player that was signed and has been with 5 teams over the last basically 2 seasons as the primary backup tackle, when all is said and done, honestly.
Yeah, I think with the O-line, you kind of just, after you have your starters there on the depth, especially a first, unofficial depth chart, you kind of just throw guys in wherever they fit, rather than having Karan Amagaji as the third left tackle. You kind of just throw him behind the right tackle, because regardless of who wins that job, whoever wins that job, whoever doesn't win the job is going to have to play left and right. That's just kind of, the way it is. You're going to be the swing tackle there. Another interesting thing I'm just noticing is that this is very just weird. I don't know why they did it this way, but they listed 5 defensive linemen as starters. They listed Grady Jarrett, Javon Dexter, and Andrew Billings all as a starter, with Montez Sweat and Diota Yingbo as the starter. Again, I don't know. They're obviously not going to be, all 5 of those guys are not going to be starting, so I don't know why they listed it that way, but I think that's very interesting. I don't know. I don't know. Curious your thoughts on that, because I don't really understand why they would have it listed that way. Technically, right on this depth chart, they have 12 starters on defense. I don't know really why they set it up that way.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a interesting sort of thing. I will say this though, maybe it is something where they're going to come out and trot out the bear front, which is basically 3 defensive tackles. But if you do that, then you're requiring Grady Jarrett, Javon Dexter, and Andrew Billings to basically all be the defensive linemen, the D tackles, which, I mean, again, they play anyway, so it sounds like Dennis Allen has some trickery up his sleeve, according to whatever personnel, this team has acquired throughout the offseason. So again, guys, this depth chart is one of those things where there's not really going to be a ton of movement. We'll discuss the other stuff on the depth chart in Thursday's episode as we get closer to that first preseason game. But I think the last thing here, dude, that we need to discuss is this. And again, you and I have been interacting on Twitter for the last couple of years. Obviously, we did it through the Trubisky years, which was a whole other thing. And then there was the quarterback competition with Nick Foles. Then there was the Justin Fields years, which I guess is a whole other story that I don't even know what to make of it. I think that's one of the ones that sort of solidified in my mind that, like, maybe the quarterback was never the issue. The franchise legitimately was. And then the last thing, obviously, here is this. Now we're living through the Caleb Williams era. And this era gets a little bit, I think it got really picky over the last 72-ish hours, because there's tons of narratives around him. Tons of stuff about Caleb Williams. He's being criticized to no avail in basically practice, which some days the Bears are in pads, some days the Bears are in practice jersey and shorts. And it's just getting to the point where I feel like everybody is just saying things to say things at this point, but 99% of the stuff is not true at all.
Yeah, I agree. First of all, okay, we're talking, regardless if you're talking about the Bears, other quarterbacks, we're talking about training camp practices. Like, there's only so much you can gather from 5-second clips that you see from a weird angle from someone, from a fan of the stands. There's not a whole lot you could really be critiquing positively or negatively. And then 2, I think when it comes to like the national narratives, because I know Cowherd got in on this, a couple other guys got in on it with Caleb Williams. The Bears get clicks. That's just the truth. And Caleb Williams specifically, gets clicks. So when a national guy says something about Caleb Williams, he's saying it because he knows that he's going to get eyes on that. Bears fans are going to come after him, which is exactly what they want. So, if you see something about Caleb Williams in a negative fashion, just move on with your day, and then people will stop doing that. But I know that's easier said than done because everyone wants to, dunk on people, and I've done that too. So it's easier said than done, but that's just kind of the way it is with these narratives. And I think you'll see Packer fans share a clip of an interception or an almost interception that Caleb Williams threw in practice and say like, "Oh, this guy's a bust." But like, here's the thing: we already have seen a year of Caleb Williams, and if there's one thing that Caleb Williams really did well last year, it was take care of the ball. He only threw 5 interceptions. He had a 1.1 interception percentage on his passes, which was third best in the NFL. Like this, he didn't throw a lot of interceptions. So the fact that maybe he's throwing some in practice, I'm not worried about. I want him to throw interceptions in practice. I want him to test the limits. I want him to see what he can do and find out what works and what doesn't work now rather than figuring it out during the season. So I'm not concerned, with Caleb Williams at all. Are there things that you can critique Caleb Williams on? Absolutely. No questions. There are things that we saw during the regular season last year. There are things that I've seen just in training camp that I'm thinking, okay, he's got to work through that. But we're also still talking about training camp practices. He's learning a new offense. He's learning the cadences. He's learning what Ben Johnson wants. Like, I'm not concerned. As we get into the regular season, if some of the same things are happening, then, we can start getting concerned. But I think we also have to remember that he will still be a second-year quarterback that is learning an offense. So even if he doesn't come out this year and, become an MVP caliber quarterback, like there's still growth to be had going to year 3. I still think we need to preach some patience for young quarterbacks across the league, not just Caleb Williams. We put these unreasonable expectations on some of these quarterbacks to come in and be the guy right away, and it doesn't always happen. But that's okay. Give them. I'm still going to give Caleb Williams 3 years, just like I gave Justin Fields 3 years, just like I gave Mitch Trubisky 3 years, just because he was deemed the more talented quarterback of those 3 doesn't mean I'm going to give up on him after 2 years. So yeah, I think it's mostly BS right now, and just a way for people to get clicks.
Well, okay, I think so. The other thing is this, and you mentioned his rookie season, but given all the changes that he had to deal with, he handled his rookie season really well. And given all the changes that he's dealing with right now, I mean, he's handled, I think, to me at least, training camp pretty well. And yes, you're going to have your good days and your bad days. And I know we mentioned this briefly last week when everyone sort of had this major firestorm cooked up on Twitter where it was like, oh my God, this guy's falling down, sort of like Chicken Little, basically, because of the way that, he had started camp out. And then later on, you get the Albert Breer report coming out saying, well, the Bears are kind of scripting a lot of these things. And so as a result of that, I mean, you can't really put too much stock into how he's performing at training camp. And the reason being is because, to me, maybe the Bears have a practice plan that's there, which states that, hey, we're going to script certain things up for the offense and defense. I should mention, this is a very detailed detail, but if you're one of those people that's at Halas Hall for camp, at some point over the next couple of days, you're going to want to get your eyes on Ben Johnson, and you're going to want to go ahead and you're going to want to see like if he has a legit piece of paper in his pocket or something, or in his hand, which a lot of the times the head coaches do. And the reason for that specifically is simply because what ends up happening is it's just like they intentionally plan and script things to see what's going to work and what's not going to go ahead and work. And so there's this entire thing of, you hear the national media saying, well, Caleb Williams sucks. But then you hear the local media saying, he had a bad day, but there were also some good plays and they're breaking down situations. And then you get Ben Johnson up there at the podium saying, his confidence is through the roof and he's continuing to respond well. So it's kind of this thing where it's like, I think that, if you were to ask Bears fans a question here and be like, well, would you rather see Caleb Williams go crazy and go off in training camp to get your hopes up? Or would you rather see him kind of go ham and go crazy in the regular season to have sustained success. I think a lot of people would say, all right, we're going to forget training camp practice for a second. We're going to go, we'd rather see him go off during the regular season because that's ultimately who's going to translate to wins.
Yeah, absolutely. There's only so much you can take from these practices from a snap by snap basis, and I think you nailed it right on the head there. Watch Ben Johnson, see what he actually has, what they're actually working on, not just looking at training camp clips. I think, and by all accounts, by the way, we haven't really discussed it here, but by all accounts, the offense won the day today. So it was we didn't mention it, but it was a very physical practice, and pretty much from what I saw, at least, the offense was kind of the one kind of coming out on top, which is really good to see. The concerns that I have right now are less about Caleb Williams and more about the offense in general. And I think they're valid concerns because Brent Johnson has mentioned that they're concerned for him as well, is the pre-snap stuff, the false starts, the delay of games. They've had a bunch of those already, and that's normal in training camp, but it does seem like when Ben Johnson talks about it, he seems a little bit annoyed by it, and it's more than just, hey, it's still early. It's starting to become a trend and I think they need to get that kind of nip in the bud a little bit. So that's my biggest concern right now, is just that pre-snap stuff. I think that will obviously just get better as all the players get comfortable in the offense, including Caleb Williams. But that's something I think we need to kind of look at. And we have their first preseason game this Sunday. It'd be really nice to come away with that, with the first team offense doesn't have any pre-snap penalties, false starts, or delay of games. And then Ben Johnson also mentioned, guys just going the wrong way. I think Kyle Monangai went the wrong way on a pitch, I believe it was in the practice. I think that was in the Family Fest practice. We had a couple offensive linemen kind of pulling the wrong way or going the wrong way. I didn't see the clips. This is just what Ben Johnson said. So that stuff, it's still very early, so it's no reason to panic just yet, but it could be a reason to panic if this is still happening next week and then, or into the preseason games. Then maybe we can start having those conversations, but it's something we should at least, mention here.
Exactly. You got to go ahead. You got to, sort of let the whole situation play out, which last note I'm going to make here is very refreshing to get a head coach that gets up there in front of the media when the Bears live stream these press conferences and basically say, yeah, well, a running back went the wrong way on a specific concept and a specific play, rather than hearing, well, we didn't necessarily do what we're supposed to do. We got to be better. We got to figure out the whys. But anyways, that's going to do it from us. You guys will hear from us on Thursday going into Friday again when we talk more stuff on the Bears depth chart, plus some other tidbits from practice, as well as talk about the first preseason game and what specifically we're looking for. Before we get out of here, if you're listening to the audio version of the episode, guys, make sure that you go ahead, drop a 5-star rating and review on Apple Pods or wherever you get your show. Make sure to like, comment, follow, and subscribe to this thing on YouTube, guys. Check out the Bear Report website as well. Tons of cool content, cool stuff going up there too. Check Steve and I out on Twitter at Usayd, Koshul, at CFC Bears, as well as at Halas Beat. Bear down, ladies and gentlemen. We will see you guys next time, and stay tuned.